And I'm going to start recording because we hope to have this available to others who couldn't join us tonight. I'd like to start this evening by introducing the president of the Monaco Historical Society. I'm sure many of you know him, Jim Conrad.
Good evening. It's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's program. Not only is this our first program of the year, it's our first attempt to present a program virtually, so we're very excited. So without further ado, I'm going to turn things back over to our program chairperson, Julia Wiley, First Vice President. Julia?
All right, thanks, Jim. I would like to introduce our speaker for this evening. And I know many of you probably know Taylor, but let me just talk a little bit about some of the many things that Taylor is. He is a teacher of history. He is a director, a historian, musician, a reenactor, and the list goes on and on. But for tonight, we can add historic homeowner and contractor to the list. Taylor is well known as a historic presenter, many different historical topics. He has been a member of several local historical boards, and tonight will take us into his own home to talk about the arts and crafts movement and the Beale home in Waterville, Ohio. Go ahead, Taylor.
Well, thank you for the very kind welcome. And thank you for everybody joining me here tonight. As Julia said, I am a teacher and I am very passionate about history, sometimes probably to a fault a little bit. And that is really what led my wife and I to come to the Waterville community. I think you're probably pretty well aware that Waterville has a very robust historical society, has an amazing historic downtown area, and it was something that really drew us to the community here. And Julia did a nice job welcoming me out here and telling you a little bit about myself, so I don't need to talk too much more about that. I am a teacher full-time at Toledo School for the Arts, and I teach all of our senior humanities courses. We have been online the entire school year. I have not taught a course in person with students since last March. So this is my life all day, every day with my students, and we're making it through. It sounds like we will be going back hopefully on March 22nd. So I cannot wait to get back into the classroom. And I am the president of the Henry County Historical Society, so just our neighboring county over. So I have a great affinity for history. And tonight I'm going to be talking about the arts and crafts movement. And I want to be able to identify and explain what the arts and crafts movement was. It was a philosophical movement during the late 18 and early 1900s. And I want to talk about the philosophy behind that movement and why people were doing what they were doing during that time period, that late 18, early 1900s era, and how it relates here to Waterville, Ohio, and some of our historic homes, obviously the Beale home. So I want to identify and explain who the key individuals were who developed the classic styles and designs of the era. And I want to explore them through the Adam and Alice Beale home, which I do believe, as far as I'm aware, at least there is one descendant. I believe we have the great-granddaughter of Adam Beale here tonight with us on Zoom. So the pressure's on. So being a teacher, if you do have questions, I cannot see all of your faces and I cannot see you all on my screen. So if you have questions, you can feel free to unmute yourselves and interrupt me. I'm very used to that teaching online. I am not upset if you interrupt me. There's also that chat feature. You can send me a private message and you can ask me a question that way. I definitely want to answer all of your questions. Are there any questions? So the arts and crafts movement actually began in the 1800s. I think most of the time people think that it began in the early part of the 1900s, but actually it began in the late 1800s, and some would even say it actually began in the 1860s in Europe. And it took a long time for some of those ideas to influence and come over across the Atlantic Ocean here to the United States. So we really see the arts and arts and crafts movement in the United States really gaining a foothold and really taking off in the early part of the 1900s. But the term arts and crafts was actually used for the first time in 1887 at a meeting of the Arts and Crafts Exhibition Society. And the arts and crafts movement is a really unique era in American history, but also world history, because it focused on a really wide range of topics, including housing, furnishings, arts, literal arts, interior design, and also even graphic design. So there's way too many topics here for me to talk about in just, the next 55 minutes. So specifically, I'm obviously going to be talking about housing. And the movement focused on using natural resources, including woods, different type of woods, stone, brick, and glass, in a way that celebrated the natural beauty. And that might not make sense to us, especially if we're not too familiar with the movement, because we might look around Waterville, Ohio, and look at our historic structures and think, well, that doesn't make sense. All of our historic structures are made out of wood and stone. Those were all natural elements that were being used. So what does the arts and crafts movement have that maybe the Civil War era or the time periods before didn't have? When we look at the architects and the designers that really started this movement, John Ruskin, Augusta Pugin, and of course, the most famous being William Morris, they had some really, really unique ideas that went against mainstream society in the United States, but also Europe as the arts and crafts movement was beginning. So I like this question here of why. Why the arts and crafts movement? Why, or what led to this change in the way people were looking at house construction, interior design, artistic design, graphic design? And the reasoning and purpose for the arts and crafts movement came in reaction to the overly industrialized manufacturing of home goods, building materials, and what some viewed as an over-embellishment and ornamentation of the Victorian era. And this is where I have to really give a disclaimer. A lot of people love the Victorian era. They love the furnishings, they love their teas, and they love Victorian houses. This is not a lecture or a PowerPoint about why the Victorian era isn't great. I think Victorian homes are beautiful. I think their furnishings are wonderful. And during the arts and crafts movement, people like William Morris got a lot of heat for his opinions on the Victorian era. So I'm just sharing his opinions. I'm sharing their philosophies during the arts and crafts movement. So if you own a Victorian home or you love Victorian fashion or furniture, I am not coming after you. I am not saying that there is a problem. Proponents of the arts and crafts movement wanted to bring back a focus on clean, simple design that celebrated handmade art, woodworking, home building, and more. And really, when you look at the Victorian era, the late 1800s, you really see this time period being heavily rooted in the Industrial Revolution. Factory workers were being overworked. They didn't have really any form of workers' rights. There was no minimum wage. If you cut your fingers off in a piece of machinery, they fired you and hired somebody else. This was a time period of industrialization that used child labor. And a lot of people really started to be made aware of the ills of the Industrial Revolution. And it promoted design that was simple, straightforward, without clutter, and a focus on functionality and purpose. And I think in one way, this is what drew the arts and crafts movement to Waterville, Ohio. Waterville, Ohio is an area that was an agricultural society. It was built on the banks of the Maumee River and on the Miami-Erie Canal. Waterville was simple people, farmers, business owners that understood the land and understood the resources. Waterville was a quaint canal town. And that's kind of what the arts and crafts movement was about, quaint, simple design. So when we look at some of the furniture, does anybody have any questions? I don't want to talk too fast. So a lot of the images you might see on my slides here are going to be of original period pieces or artifacts from the arts and crafts movement, like this lamp here. It has simple glass inserts. It's an oak framed design. This children's rocking chair is a very simple design. You'll notice it doesn't have what we would see during the Victorian era of a lot of ornate carving. I mean, there's no carving on this piece whatsoever. It's stripped down, but yet it's really, really well made and it's sturdy. This is a children's rocking chair, but believe me, you would not want to fall on it because it's not going to give. It's going to be robust and strong and sturdy. And then this piece of wallpaper up here is actually a design by William Morris. And this is his very famous lattice work design, which had very straight, square lattice work framing, but then this very naturalistic flowing vine that wrapped up through it with William Morris's very famous birds, which we're going to take a look at some wallpaper examples here tonight. So this here is not arts and crafts furniture. This is Victorian furniture at its finest. This is what we would call East Lake furniture. And as I said, I am not speaking ill on East Lake furniture. It is beautiful furniture, and my home has some East Lake furniture in it. The reality is, though, is that East Lake furniture was actually made in factories, and it was mass produced, and it was produced pretty rapidly or quick. The boards are thinner, they're not quite as robust. This is furniture that today you would want to be very delicate when you sit down on it. And it's certainly not furniture that you would want to have a big party of people over and have them plopping down in it or sitting down in it hard. This is the furniture that Adam and Alice Beale would have experienced just before they were going to construct their home. And like I said, it was manufactured quickly with really fast tools. And yes, it's hand carved, but if you actually look at East Lake furniture, they were carving the pieces and sending it down the line very rapidly. So it's not as unique as a lot of people think. This is a hall tree. Again, you can see the very ornate cut, carved pieces on this East Lake piece, lots of shelves. There's just a lot going on here in this design. Now, again, many people view this as very highly collectible today. It's worth a lot of money, and it is very, very beautiful work. However, it is industrialized work. So this is some of the furniture that was being rejected by the arts and crafts movement. This here, both of these examples are Victorian homes. These would be known as Queen Anne style Victorian homes. You can see these in the Old West End in Toledo, Ohio. You can see them in parts of Perrysburg. Napoleon, Ohio has several Queen Anne homes. The museum for Henry County is actually in a Queen Anne Victorian home. And they're known for their cupolas and their turrets and their multi-tiered roof lines. And Queen Anne homes look kind of like a castle. And this, again, was viewed as the arts and crafts movement as standing out against the landscape, that these homes didn't fit in with the landscape or the environment that they were being built in, and that these homes were simply too ornate. The building materials were being rapidly and fastly produced so they could construct these homes quickly. And the arts and crafts movement wanted to do away with all this ornate detailing and simplify home building again. So when we look at arts and crafts homes, they mistakenly are viewed as being homes from the 1940s. You could easily drive past my house or other homes from this era and think that they're from the 20s, the 1930s, or 40s. And there is a bleed over with the arts and crafts movement. It doesn't just stop at 1920. It definitely goes into the 20s and the 30s. And we do see some elements of it actually still continuing into the 40s, but it's pretty rare at that point. So when my wife and I decided to look for homes, and I said we wanted to look in Waterville, I said we have to have a historic home. And I said I wanted it to be a home from the 1800s. And as many of you from Waterville are probably familiar, homes from the 1800s bring a certain amount of work, and there can be some issues with them that are quite concerning. And we were very fortunate to find a home on North 4th Street in Waterville. And we had our realtor and we went and looked at it. And it was a home from, I believe, about 1920. And I said, it's getting a little too late for me, Ashley. I really don't want to live in a home from the 20s. I really want to be in something as early as we can get. And it wasn't meant to be. We lost that home quickly. We didn't even get to put a bid in on it, but we really liked North 4th Street. And 2 weeks later, we get a phone call from our realtor. She says, I have this house. It was built in 1917. And she says, it's an arts and crafts home. Taylor, I think you're going to love it. And we showed up and I saw it and I thought, there's no way this home is from 1917. It doesn't look like it to me. And when we went inside, I was totally changed. And I realized that I could love an early 1900s home. And our home was constructed by Adam and Alice Beale. And it's kind of unique because Adam Beale was a farmer. He was a very successful farmer from Haskins, Ohio, so just across the river from us. And he had established himself in the Haskins community, and he built this home and would actually pass away in 1918. So he wasn't here very long. He got it built in 1917, and by 1918, Adam Beale had already passed. And it's built in the classic arts and crafts style. And you can find us at 29 North 4th Street in Waterville, Ohio. So here's a few pictures of our home. And here's a photo of Adam and his wife, Alice. Now, Adam was previously married, and this is not a lecture about their family history, so I'm not gonna go too much more into it. But Adam and he was previously married, and his wife, his first wife had actually passed away. And then he married Alice Beale. She was formerly a heater, and the heater home still stands just on the other side of the street from us. The home sits between two other Craftsman homes. On the left is the former Waterville Funeral Home, which was built, I asked the owners, they said, one said 1908, the other one said 1909. Zillow tells me 1907. So Mr. Jim Conrad, if you have anything to add to this, you let me know. But the funeral home was sometime around 1907. And on our other side is the former Roop or Rupp home, and that was built in 1917. Somewhere else, though, I saw 1915. But these homes are all being constructed in that early part of the 1900s, and they are all Craftsman homes. So there it is. Our home is very difficult to see. It does have some pretty large trees in front of it. And that is actually very indicative of arts and crafts homes. They were surrounded by natural landscapes, and the homes, they wanted them to fit into the landscape. They didn't want these homes to stand out against the landscape. So our home is kind of hard to photograph sometimes. Here it is in early spring. And the home has been modified quite a bit on the front. Originally, it would have been a full open front porch, and at some time, part of the porch was closed in. But generally speaking, there are a lot of elements to the home that still remain. So here are some photos. Again, Adam and Alice Beale. And then this photo on the left was posted on the Waterville historical page. And this is of the school teachers down at the Waterville school. And Alice Beale was an educator. She was a school teacher, which is kind of ironic because I'm a school teacher. So our home has had several school teachers live in it. And Alice is this individual right here. Other notable residents that have lived in our house, some of you might be familiar with Ernest H Farrell Sr. He wrote a book, and his book was titled Stories I Want My Grandchildren to Know. And in the book, he talks about our home. There's a photo of our home in this book. And he was a World War I veteran, and he worked for the Waterville Bank downtown. So it was in walking distance, which was one reason he lived in our home. And Ernest is really kind of cool to me because I always had a major fascination as a child with the Titanic. And I was so excited when I read in his book that he actually traveled on the Titanic sister ship, the Olympic. So I photographed the Olympic here. It's kind of cool to live in a house that somebody traveled on the Olympic. His son, Robert Farrell, was a 1939 graduate of Waterville High School. I don't know if you're all aware of the Waterville Historical Society's Facebook page and their website. I have learned so much on there, and so much of this information about my home I've been able to gain from the Waterville Historical Society. So when you have questions, you need to contact them. But Farrell wrote and edited more than 60 books and was the leading historian in the US and was considered the leading authority on the administration of Harry S. Truman. And he was regarded by historians in the United States as the Dean of American Diplomatic Historians. So we've had a lot of really interesting people who have lived in this home. So when we look at the arts and crafts movement and we look at the exterior of the home, you're going to find that arts and crafts homes have usually some form of what's called hard construction. This is going to be river rock or brick. Sometimes it's a mixture. Our home, the Beale home, consists of a 3-tone brick color, red, dark brown, and brown green brick. And this greenish hue of the brick can be picked up in the paint color. And when we think of hard construction, the goal of using river rock or brick on the lower portion of the home also extended up into the pillars or columns, which are oftentimes a tapered column. And there's a lot of new home construction going on in Waterville. And if you drive through those new housing developments, it's really interesting to see because the tapered pillars or columns on these homes are actually from the arts and crafts movement. So it's become very popular again. And the purpose was to tie the house to the land and give the appearance that the house was rising out of the land. The brick, the stone was indicative of the land. So you wanted colors that seemed native or more indigenous to the region or the area. Now, I have had people ask, well, aren't they just constructing the base of these homes out of river rock or brick because it is stronger? The actual surprising answer is no. My home here, built in 1917, actually has a poured concrete foundation, and the brick does not start until just the dirt line. So I do not have a brick basement. I do not have a cobblestone basement. I have an actual poured basement, which was new technology during that time period. The first floor is finished in clapboard siding, which you can see here. Hopefully you can see my images and you can see my little pointer. And then you'll notice that on the second floor, you usually have some kind of transition into a different building material. And for us here, it's still wood construction, but it's going to be shaker shingle, which is a devil to paint. Let me tell you, you do not want to have to paint shaker shingle. The base, middle, and upper roof line and trim work wraps the entire structure and divides the various facing materials up. So you can see a lot of framework that goes on, but it's not ornate. It's there and it's painted and it stands out against these different building materials, but it's not ornate. It's not like what you would see during the Victorian era. And I think this really speaks to Adam Beale. I can't help but think about him with this house. You know, Adam was a farmer, like I said, from Haskins. You know, he lived a pretty unfettered, uncluttered lifestyle. And I think you really kind of see that in the construction of this arts and crafts home. Yet there are still some really nice details in this home that I can't help but think that in his later years of life, he was kind of deciding like, yeah, I'm going to spend some money here. I'm going to live in a home with some really nice details. Typically, the porch on an arts and crafts home runs the full length or front of the house. And like I said, ours has been closed off on half of the home. What was really unique during the early 1900s is there was a shift towards what we call outdoor living. And these homes start to have these really large porches built on the front of them. Sometimes there were porches on the back and even what were called airing decks. And these were on the second floor of your home. And this was so during the hot summer days, you could essentially live outside on a front porch. And then at nighttime, you could retreat to the second floor of your home and actually sleep outside, but under a roof line on an airing deck. So you could, as the term says, get some air. Our home does have an airing deck on the upper story, which is probably where Adam and Alice were able to get some air late at night during the heat of the summer. So there's a zoom in for you. You can see the heavy brickwork on the chimney. You can see this tapered column or pillar here on the front porch. And then you can see a little bit of the brick along our driveway. You'll notice the windows are rather large, or a little bit larger, and the goal was to let in a lot of sunlight. You want to get a lot of sunlight into an arts and crafts home. You want to invite the outside in. You'll notice that the roof is supported by these brackets that jut out. But again, they're not ornate. They're not overly ornate like what we would expect to see on a Victorian home. They're simplified and refined. One way I always say too, you can tell an arts and crafts home, a major part of the roof line is going to be an A. You can see me drawing here. The roof line makes an A for arts and crafts. Does anybody have any questions? Like I said, interrupt me if you have a question out there. So this is a totally different home. This is not the Adam and Alice Beale home. But again, it is a Craftsman home, and you can see a very similar design here. You can see that very classic A-frame shape for A for arts and crafts. You can see the division between the shaker shingle and the clapboard or wood siding. All classic parts of the arts and crafts movement. Here's another arts and crafts home. I selected this image. It looks very similar to our home, but I selected this image because they actually have the river rock foundation instead. Ours is a brick foundation. And you can see with this image how this home really fits into the trees, and it really fits into the landscape, and it doesn't look obtrusive to the landscape, which was really important. So when we think about exterior landscaping, prior to the arts and crafts movement, everything was very refined, very square lines, and landscape during the Victorian era was focused on very like Greek, Greco-Roman style landscaping. And the arts and crafts movement did away with that. And they have what is called cottage gardens. And this was a very organic style of landscaping. And we had some remnants left of that at our house, but it was pretty far gone. There was one tree left in the backyard, a lilac tree, which is pretty sizable, which we believe does date back to the original construction of the home and would have been planted by the Beales. It's still here. It smells amazing. It's right out the backside of our kitchen. So water features became very popular, organic water fountains, koi ponds or fish ponds became very popular. So we reinstalled one of those. We relayed a mixture of stone slabs and then brickwork as well. Everything is supposed to be very organic in an arts and crafts landscape. And all of this material here you see in the bottom left-hand corner was reclaimed materials, which again would go along with the arts and crafts movement. And all of these slabs here are actually the original sidewalks from the Old West End in Toledo. So I had those sidewalks brought to our house here in Waterville, Ohio, and now we have a little bit of the Old West End in Waterville's North 4th Street area. So the plants during the arts and crafts movement were native to the area or the region, grasses, ferns, and wildflowers, and you don't want to necessarily keep things separated. You want things to kind of grow together and you want it to have a very natural look. So we have a lot of wildflowers. We have a lot of various plant species that were purchased from Nature's Nursery and the Conservancy Project through Oak Openings, which we brought those back into our landscape, which have been really great. You can see some of our trees here. Here's the lilac tree from the Beales. And then we have a cherry blossom tree, which is kind of this oriental type feel, which was very common as well. And yes, we do have fish in our koi pond. So the interior of a Craftsman home, the key characteristics of the Beale home is the beginning of an open floor plan. And we see these in a lot of arts and crafts home where they were starting to open the spaces up a lot more instead of these really small compacted spaces. And the development of permanent furniture, built-in bookcases, cupboards, built-in sideboards, benches, and storage areas for linens and clothing really become a hallmark of an arts and crafts home. So in the Beale home, there is a built-in linen closet that has drawers and cupboards. In Adam Beale's bedroom, he specifically had a built-in, this is very unique, a built-in like men's suit, coat, and shirt cupboard. It's not a closet. You can't walk into it. It's literally designed for jackets and men's shirts. They hang perfectly, and it has a solid wood interior. And you're saying, why do you not have a picture of this? It was very tricky to get a picture of and kind of have it make sense. So there's lots of built-in furniture I'm going to be showing you. Natural woods of oak and walnut became very popular. You wanted woods in the home that were more native or organic to the actual area you were from. So oak openings, lots of oak. So the Beale home is very unique because all of the floors on the first floor are all wood, excluding the kitchen. And they are what's called white oak. So they're not just oak, they're of a white oak. And typically on the second floor of your home, people didn't really go up there. So you would find that the wood floors would be a lesser grade. They wouldn't be as expensive. So white oak was really expensive then. It's very expensive now. Interestingly enough, Adam Beale he also had white oak installed in all of the bedrooms upstairs, the landing, and the hallways. So everything in the house is white oak, which is really interesting. So this is an example of what a traditional craftsman home would have looked like. This home here is in 1904. This is not the Beale home. This is not the Beale home, but it was becoming very popular to photograph or have artistic renderings of these spaces for people who were building homes. And there are a lot of elements of this image that we see Adam Beale deciding to use in the construction of his home in Waterville here. So a few key elements, you're going to find that the fireplace is always in a central location in the house where it's the focal point. You're going to find wood beam ceilings, or what we call coffered ceilings, which I'm going to show you ours, were incredibly popular. So when we moved into our house, you've got to remember that there was a really interesting period in American history that loved laminate floorings, loved covering up the original history of the homes, liked covering things in asbestos, and doing away with a lot of the original design. This is what our fireplace looked like when we moved in. At some point, the owners covered it in this like kind of shiplap wood box. They filled in the original fireplace. And I had to go in and tear this covering all out. They had put 2x4s up. Behind that was more coffered ceilings, and they ripped off Adam Beale's original mantle, which I was not able to locate or find. The brick had been painted many times, and they applied this wood onto the fireplace by coating the fireplace in tar, which I did not know was a way that you applied wood to a fireplace, but apparently you can use tar to apply wood to a fireplace. So through lots and lots of work, this is where I've got the fireplace too. This is the original Beale fireplace. I tried to remove as much of the tar as possible, but the problem was it was significantly damaging the brick. So I had no choice but to paint the brick another layer. And so I painted it white, much to the chagrin of my historian, what I want to do with this fireplace, but it is white right now. These are the original brick colors that I was able to expose. And I was not able to, at this time, have an original arts and crafts mantle mounted. Instead, I actually opted for this beam, which was popular during the arts and crafts movement. This beam here actually came from my ancestors settled in a small community called Evansport, Ohio, near Bryan. And the original barn my ancestors built in the 1860s is still there, but it is collapsing. And luckily the farmer cut this beam out and he donated this to our house. So this beam is actually hand hewn by my ancestors. The fire was a coal burning fireplace at one time. And at this time it is all sealed off and no longer works, but it is my goal to get it operating again. So in the Beale home, there is what's called a colonnade here. And these were incredibly popular in arts and crafts homes. And this is what began to open up the living spaces of these homes, because you can see through into the other room. And there is a wide variety of these designs of the columns and the bookshelves. This one here even has a desk. The Beale columns at some point were totally ripped out. When we got the home, only half of the colonnade was left. This is one section of the original Beale, Adam Beale. And these are the original doors, which I have cleaned and stripped down. You can see I have a lot more work to go here, but both of them are still intact. But the columns or the pillars were ripped out and removed. And I had those totally reconstructed and put back together. This is more of what it would have looked like when Adam Beale lived here. This is in a different home. This is not our home. This home is actually in California, but it is a very similar setup to our home. This is, again, not our home, but this is another example of another style of column. And you can see you have your dining room going into the family room or living space, and there's your fireplace. That's the exact same setup to the Beale home. So this is Adam Beale's dining room. Welcome to our home. You can see both bookcases are still built in with the original leaded glass. None of the leaded glass was damaged. And they have matching leaded glass window in the back of the dining room here. This colonnade and the leaded glass windows were purchased through the Sears and Roebuck company. And Adam Beale could have custom ordered these. And I was a little surprised. Adam Beale, for a farmer, sometimes we see farmers being a little tight with their pocketbook. Adam Beale did opt to purchase the most expensive door inserts in 1917 for these bookcases. You would say, how do you know that? Well, I was able to go through the original Sears and Roebuck catalog, and I was able to actually find the exact same matching doors that he ordered, and they were the most expensive at that time. In total, for the pillars and the bookshelves and everything, Adam would have paid about $745 for all of this, which by today's standards would be about $2,000. So he spent some money. The window in the back of the dining room was paid for by the foot. You could order so much. And again, this was actually a pretty pricey investment for him. So he definitely kind of wanted to show off a little bit here later in life, I would say. He was proud of his work. He was a very successful farmer. He had the money. You'll notice the ceilings are coffered. We do have the coffered ceilings. Down behind the table here, you will notice another piece of permanent furnishing. This would be what is called a sideboard. We would probably mistakenly call this a buffet. During the arts and crafts movement, this was called a sideboard, and it serves as a buffet. And it has a lot of different drawers and open doors in it. And this is how I found it when I moved in. I was not happy. It had many, many layers of paint on it. Everything in our house either had way too many layers of wallpaper or has way too many layers of paint. And I set out to restore this back to its former glory of how it would have looked when Adam was here. So if you ever strip wood, number one, wear a mask, because everything in our home in 1917 is going to be lead-based paint. So you have to wear your mask, probably should wear gloves. And I'm going to recommend that you get dental tools like what you use when you go to the dentist. That's what I had to use to make this happen. So I was able to go in and I was able to, just like the dentist, floss and clean out all of this woodwork. And it's ironic because the molding on this sideboard is actually called dental molding because it has what are these wood blocks that are called teeth. So I spent many hours here turning this sideboard back into what it would have looked like when Adam Beale lived here. Here is the final product. You can see I was able to acquire original knobs, which are glass, and was able to strip this down and then be able to refinish it as best as I could. I tried to be very delicate with that refinishing process. So it is, again, kind of the key focal point now of our dining room. My wife liked it white, and I said, if you please let me strip this, I promise you'll think it's gorgeous. And I stripped it down, and she was very happy. So this is the ceiling inside Adam Beale's dining room. You can see the cofferding is still intact. It was never painted. Nobody ever painted it in over 100 years of this home being here. Nobody painted it, thank goodness. Unfortunately, the original light fixture was removed, and we're looking for a suitable replacement. The dining room has coffered ceilings as well as the main living room and entry room. So again, Adam wasn't really sparing too much expense here. He was really putting a lot of detail into this home. And this is all the original cofferding. It's untouched. So we're very fortunate with that. So this is just a nice detail image for you to see really the craftsmanship and the woodworking that went on here. It was very much a very attractive feature to the home when my wife and I both walked into it. So some of the details of the arts and crafts movement are paint colors, burnt orange and reds, sage green, pine, forest greens, golden yellows, and other earth tones were incredibly popular during this movement. Again, it's that idea of inviting the outdoors inside. So you might have noticed, if I go back here in the dining room, you'll notice this very sagey green color on the walls. That is actually the same sage green color that was in the original wallpaper of the dining room. So when I stripped the wallpaper, there were 5 layers of wallpaper in the dining room. It was terrible. It was so much work. And I know that there are many other homeowners of historic homes that have had way worse, but the final original layer had this green sage color to it. And trying to keep it true to how the home looked, we opted for that color. The main living space has this goldenrod yellow, which kind of looks tan during parts of the day, and then gets a more dark, rich goldy color as the sun sets. So very popular colors. We're trying to keep all of our paint colors original. All of our paints, of course, are purchased at the Waterville hardware store. So wallpaper was actually still popular. Wallpaper became very popular during the Victorian era, but it was heavy. You wallpapered your ceilings, you wallpapered your walls, you had borders, you had lower fillers, wallpaper in Victorian homes. And one of the most popular wallpaper designers was a gentleman named William Morris. And he was and is today still one of the most popular graphic designers from this time period. And these are some of his wallpaper examples here. We just finished one of the upstairs bedrooms in our home, which is going to become a nursery because we are expecting our first child here in April. And this wallpaper right here, this William and Morris design, is actually going to be used in that nursery. We're having custom pillows made with this. And then we also are having William and Morris curtains that are going to be hung in that nursery. So if our kid does not like history, they're in big trouble. They are in big trouble because they're going to be looking at those curtains for a few years. So these William and Morris styles of wallpaper are still available. You can get them through various online resources. Bradbury.com has a lot of reproduction wallpapers as well. This is the most famous in the lower left corner. This is called Strawberry Thief, and this is one of Morris's most famous designs. It's very popular. We have some teacups in our dining room with this design on them. And it actually is influenced by the early 1850s coverlets that were woven pre-Civil War and Civil War era that actually had very similar designs. So again, it's bringing that arts and crafts, that homemade back into the home. Staircases in arts and crafts homes were very ornate in the woodwork and the way the wood was cut. It wasn't ornate in like all this little detailing. It provided the opportunity to show off wealth, and it provided the opportunity for woodworkers to show off their skill. So typically in a wealthier home or more expensive staircases would cut back. And what I mean is they would go up and then they would turn, or they would come down, they'd hit a landing and then they'd come down. There would be some kind of turn or curve in the staircase where there would be multi-tiered railings. And that could really show off the craftsmanship of the woodworker. So here are some examples. You can see these rounded stairs. Here's another piece of hard interior immovable furniture. You have a bookcase here. Here's another staircase. This one actually makes, it comes down, makes a turn, comes down, makes a turn. So Adam Beale's home had a pretty ornate staircase in it. We know that it had a turn in it. We know it had multiple pillars or finials. And if you can tell by the way I'm talking, we know that it had this and we know that it had that. At some point, one of the homeowners in this house's history tore the entire original staircase out. And they replaced it with a 1960s, 1970s Brady Bunch staircase with the spiral metal railing. It looks like it should be on a hotel in Florida from the 1950s. And they totally destroyed that section of the home. We, in the industry of talking about historic homes, when you can see where things were, elements of a home were on the walls or in the flooring, we call this ghosting. And you can actually see on the original wood floors, the ghosting or footprint of where the original staircase was, including some of the ornate railings even, believe it or not. And you can see where there was some kind of hard built-in either bookcase or bench that was built into the staircase. Whatever that staircase looked like, I'm telling you, it was a showstopper. The staircase today, I didn't take a picture of it. I'm not going to show it to you. You can come knock on my door. I will not show you this staircase. It is terrible. It is our full goal. We're doing a lot of research and getting a lot of quotes on what it would cost to do our best to reconstruct the staircase that would best reflect what Adam Beale probably had. I think that's a little bit off on our project list, but it's coming. Here's another example, looking in through those pillars into an original Craftsman staircase. I'm talking a lot. Does anybody have any questions thus far? So it is 7:48. Yeah, we're moving really well here. I want to go back before I shut this down. I didn't know how long this would take. I do want to go back to the image of the dining room because how much architecture I'd be able to really about in our time. You might have noticed in the dining room that there is this high woodwork that goes around the room. The original plate rail, and this is called a plate rail, these were common during the arts and crafts movement, but again, they were typically used a little bit more in wealthier upper level homes. When we purchased the house, again, this was all ripped out. And you'll notice that they actually installed base radiator heating here. And they replaced this with 1960s wood paneling with the different widths. And they had wood paneling that went up about quarter of the wall. And when we stripped all the original wallpaper and we got to the original, what I would call the Beale level of the wallpaper, you could see where the original plate rail was. You could see where the original woodwork was and where the owners at some point had ripped it out. So the Adam Beale house went through a really tremendous period where somebody got a hold of this place and decided to modernize it. And they ripped a lot of the original features out. So we have had the task of going back in. We've put these pillars back in. We put all this woodwork back in. You know, we've had to strip window frames. We've had to strip doors. The floors, the original, all the floors in the house were covered with carpet. So all the wood floors are exposed today. Every single one of them, we had to remove all that carpet. So a lot of what you're seeing has had to be put back into the home, restored, refurbished, brought back. I did find some things in the garage. So I just wanted to highlight, when you're looking at some of this woodwork here on these sides, unfortunately, we've had to put this all back in. Now this is all original. So kind of to wrap this up for you, the arts and crafts movement was characterized by simple, honest construction and artistic designs. I think Adam Beale, as a farmer from Haskins, came from very humble roots. He was an immigrant. He was a very hardworking individual, from my understanding and reading about him. Alice Beale came from very humble roots, born and raised here in Waterville, Ohio, a school teacher, growing up just one block over from this house. You know, these were very humble people. And I think the arts and crafts movement really spoke to their humble beginnings and the type of people they were. I also think, though, that Adam Beale's successes as a farmer allowed him to have a little expendable income. And I think later in his life, he used that to build this really beautiful home. The arts and crafts movement focused on a decluttered and unfettered lifestyle that honored good, humble craftsmanship. The movement focused on returning homes to more humble beginnings, fitting them into the landscape, and bringing the landscape inside. All of the windows, unfortunately, in the house, luckily, the leaded glass windows are still all intact. All the rest of the original windows have all been replaced with modern windows. And that's really unfortunate. Whenever a historic home loses its original windows, it really kind of does away with some aspects of the home being historic. But nevertheless, my wife and I have been working really hard to bring this home back to what Adam intended it to be. And when Alice Beale died, her obituary, the Waterville Historical Society had a copy of her obituary. And one thing that really stood out to me was that Alice Beale's obituary said the two greatest joys in her life were her children and her home. And when Ashley and I looked at this home, we felt that the moment we walked into it, that this was a very loving home. While it sounds like it wasn't really well taken care of, it had been well taken care of. All the original doors and doorknobs, they're all glass. They're all the original doorknobs. Were all here and intact. Alice Beale's funeral did take place here at this home. Her body was put on display in the front room of our home where our couch sits. Adam and Alice Beale are buried in Wakeman Cemetery just up the road. I've cut some lilacs off of her lilac tree and I've taken them to Alice and Adam and Alice's grave for them. You know, history is a very important thing to me, clearly to all of you, and that's why you're here. So I hope when you drive by the house, you feel that we're bringing it back to what it once looked like, and we're taking good care of it here in Waterville. So if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer them for you.
Okay, if anyone has any questions, just make sure you turn your microphone back on and feel free to talk to Taylor. I had showed Taylor, I actually grew up in a arts and crafts home in Fort Jennings, Ohio. And I actually shared some of the photos of that home with Taylor. So this is like going home for me when I see all of the pictures of his home. It's the first time I've seen them. Phenomenal work, Taylor. I redid a historic home in Westmoreland here in Toledo. Believe me, I know how much work it is to redo the floors, the woodwork and everything you need, but boy, is it beautiful at the end. And I just can't say enough for the work you're involved in. So keep at it. But yeah, it's really, really a beautiful example of an arts and crafts home.
Well, thank you.
Taylor?
Yes, sir.
Conrad here. I don't have a question, but I want to offer a little human interest note here. You mentioned that to the north of the Beale house was the home of Herman Roop and his wife Philippine. Those of us who remember Waterville prior to 1970, for years Herman ran the Roop Canal Store from 1903 to 1970, where the 3rd Street Cigar Building is now. His wife Philippine, of course, was the daughter of Adam and Alice Beale. So Herman had the pleasure of his mother and father-in-law living to the left of them. To the right of them, right across Mechanic Street, was the home of Jacob and Carly Roop. They were Herman's parents. So Philippine had the I guess we would say the advantage of having her mother-in-law and father-in-law living next door too. With the possible exception of having babysitters on both sides of you, I often wondered what kind of privacy this would have afforded to a young couple such as Herman and Philippine.
It's really interesting that you bring that up, and I appreciate you bringing that up because there is still a sidewalk that runs out our back door and it joins the Roop home to our home. And a privacy fence was put up by the former owners of our house, and that was the Agees. If any of you are familiar with Mary Agee, we would not be in this home without Mary. Truthfully, we are indebted to her. And I walked out the back door and I said, Mary, what is this sidewalk running under this privacy fence? And the Agees had actually put up a privacy fence. So you just have this sidewalk that goes out our back door and it goes underneath this privacy fence to our neighbor. So yes, they were very connected. Yep.
Hey, Taylor, it's Deb Dower.
Yes.
So I'm Adam's great-great-granddaughter. And I was going to show you, Taylor and I met online when I was asking, how do I figure out how to find where my grandfather moved to after he retired from the farm. And so we've been trying to get together, but COVID hit and we haven't been able to get together. But over my shoulder, you can't see it, but you can see the picture there. That's the farm that Adam Beale built, the entire farm. So the barn, the house, everything. My brother lives right next door and he's going to want to swap stories with you because he lived in the farmhouse for a number of years and remodeled parts of it. It wasn't nearly as beautiful as your home. So my theory is, and I started doing a lot of family research. So Adam's first wife was Louisa Bishop. She died at age 36, leaving, and it looks like she died 5 days after giving birth to their last child. So poor Adam had 6 children from ages newborn to 10 years old. So when he married Alice, she got 5 kids or 6 kids all at one time, including a newborn. I think they got married less than a year after Louisa died. So my theory is after being in that farmhouse was like a working farmhouse. But it was really cool, but not fancy at all. And when he retired, when Adam retired, he moved to Waterville. Then his oldest daughter, Elise, we called her Lizzie, Grandma Lizzie, she married Fred Dower, my great-grandfather. So they took over the farm. When he retired, they moved to Haskins, just like 2 doors down from the gas station on the same side of the street. And then my grandpa Arnold took it over, and his wife Ruth. And my dad, grew up on the farm. And it really was a working farm, but it's been handed down over the generations. So my brother will commiserate with you on layers and layers of wallpaper, because I don't think my grandpa changed anything. He was that cheap farmer who had, the first nickel he ever made. So I think they put a lot of time and effort into the farm. And then when he retired, that became the dream home. The 6 kids are gone. And when he did marry Alice, they had Philip Keenan. So that was her only child, and moved.
You move with too much genealogy here.
Yeah, lots of genealogy.
Yep.
Yeah.
So farmhouse, we'd love to get you in there sometime. None of us live in it anymore. My brother does live next door. We don't farm the farm, we still farm. But yeah, we're still all in the area, and we would love to see your house someday. You've done wonderful, wonderful.
Absolutely.
Oh,
Absolutely.
I've got to tell you, after you and I talked online, you helped me solve the mystery of this old book. So you can open the first picture. There's Filipino.
Yes.
So it's what I figured out by backing into it. This is Alice Heater Beale's family album. So
Wow.
I can't wait for you to see that, because it's full of all the Beales.
Wow. Very
And
cool.
Grandma and Grandpa, Alice's grandma and Grandpa Beale, or Heater, are in there as well.
Just shut it off. It'll go away.
That's amazing.
Yep.
Awesome. Well, I had just
No, you gotta hit it again.
one question here. Rose says in the chat, are the arts and crafts homes similar to the Cedars homes?
Okay.
The answer is
That was
to that
good.
simply, yes, they are. The Sears and Roebuck's homes did pick up on the arts and crafts movement and monopolize on it. They sold a lot of homes. The Sears homes were craftsman in design. However, that is something that I want to make a big deal about before I get out of here. In short, not every home that looks like a Sears home is a Sears home. And I'm going to give you the secret of how to know. Every Sears home kit had black stamped numbers on the rafters, on the windows. Somewhere there's marking numbers on all of these kits, because they had to have the numbers to be able to assemble the house. When I looked through the Beale home, because people said, oh, I bet it's a Sears home. Our realtor told us this was a Sears home. Nowhere in the attic, nowhere in the basement, nowhere in this house did I see those classic Sears and Roebuck stamping numbers that would help you build the house and put it together. I found two stamp marks. Three. One in the front window, one in the other front window, and one in the leaded glass. So the windows were ordered from Sears and Roebuck's, but this house most certainly was not a Sears and Roebuck's catalog home. So the next time somebody says, I have a Sears and Roebuck house, you need to say to them, let me see the receipts on that. And literally you'll be able to find it inside the home. So there's your answer. Thank you for all your great comments in the chat there. I don't want to keep people too long. Thank you for all your kind comments and thank yous, and for having me. And Deb, I can't wait to get together with you.
I know.
Julia, thank you for having me. Waterville Historical Society, thank you for having me. I'm happy to be a member, and I look forward to doing a presentation in the future, hopefully in person.
Well, Taylor, thank you very much. Really interesting. I love showing off architecture. It's wonderful. Before we leave tonight, I would just like to ask Steve Lauer if he would give us a few words. Steve is our membership chair, and we typically like to have a few words about membership on our program. Steve?
Thank you, Julie. First, let me say, great job, Taylor. My wife and I, our first home was in the second block of North, the corner of North and Fourth. And we've driven by that home hundreds of times. So it's great to see someone who really appreciates it and is doing the work that you are on it, own it. So that's great to see. And you've done a marvelous job so far. To our members, I want to thank all of our 2020 members for being active and being members in last year. It was a tough year for us. We had so many activities that we had planned that could not be done because of COVID. So thank you for hanging with us anyway. Thank you for those who have renewed already for 2021. If you haven't renewed your membership for 2021, please consider doing so. And if you aren't a current member, I hope you will consider joining us. Taylor's presentation is the first of many outstanding activities we have planned for 2021, COVID willing, and your memberships help make those activities possible. To renew your membership or to join, you can go to our website, www.watervillehistory.org, and we have 5 different membership categories to choose from. So hope you'll consider joining us if you aren't a member currently. So thank you all for attending this evening. Back to you, Julie.
Okay, thanks, Steve. We are continuing our programs for this year. Our next program will be in March. I believe I sent a flyer out to everyone, and it is also up on the website. And I will actually be the speaker next month in honor of Women's History Month. We are going to talk about a pioneer who became a native princess as a child and then went on to be an observer or participant in some of the most famous events in the Old Northwest Territory. So we're going to talk about Eleanor Lytle. And her full name would be Eleanor Lytle McKillop Kinsey. And we're going to explore her life a little bit as a adopted member of a Native tribe all the way up to being one of the founders of Chicago. So hope you can all come back. Again, that program is out on the, I'm sure it's on the Facebook page and website of the Society, and we will be doing it in the same fashion with Zoom, and you can make your reservations for that the same way you did for today. So again, thank you all for coming. We really appreciate it. And for right now, we're going to sign off and hope to see you all back in about a month or so. So thanks a bunch.
Thank you. Nice job.
Thank you, Taylor.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Have a good evening.
Bye-bye, everyone.